27, and they told him and said, when we went to the land where you sent us, it was truly a place that flowed with milk and honey, and why even here is the fruit. Did you ever hear the story about the two guys pedaling a two-wheel bicycle? You know, and they're going right up a steep hill, and boy, it's just getting harder and harder. Did you ever try to go up a real steep hill with a bicycle? When I was a junior high kid, I finally got me I think it was like a 20-inch bike, and and had a ball with that, because I lived up in the mountains, as you know, and you're always going up and down these hills. And one hill in particular was extremely, extremely steep. And I would be moving so slow by the time I got almost to the top. The only way I could keep my momentum going, I would learn to rock the bike back and forwards. Now, see, if you've never lived in the hills, you don't understand that. And that would actually give you a little swaying with your body. And you know what? It was one of the best exercises I ever had, because the time I was 14 years old already, and I'd never been on a lift machine in my life, but I could dunk a basketball. And even the coach came up to me and said, "Who has trained you to jump like that?" And I got to telling him how I'd ride the bike for, all summer long especially. Wherever you went, that was your mode of transportation in those days. And these two guys are going up this steep hill, and, there are two of them, and it's just getting harder and harder. And finally, though, by God's grace, they got to the top of the hill. And the guy in front turned around and said, that was a terrible steep hill. And the guy behind him said, you're right. I'm glad I kept the brakes on the whole time so that we wouldn't go backwards. So, that's the way life is sometimes. Well, 8:30 is a tough crowd to tell a joke. Let's tell the truth now. But it's the truth. Sometimes it seems like in life you're going forward, but somebody behind you's holding the brake. Have you ever had that happen to you? I mean, seriously, tell the truth. It's possible. This is the case. God, as you know the story, has brought Israel out of the land of Egypt, out of slavery, out of terrible bondage, and now they've come to a point they're ready to take to what God had promised them, to the promised land. And Moses, of course, sends 10 spies in to see that. And they come back, and the report at first was phenomenal, wasn't it? It was just like God had said. There was a place of great abundance of food. Why, even one translation said that the flowers were massive. It was just like God had took this place and literally gave it a special blessing in life. And that's the way it is sometimes in life. Do you ever just have a day that everything goes right? Do you ever have those days? One time. And then you said I did, and it's all that's behind, isn't it? So, well, that's true. Do you ever have one of those days? Now, let me tell you, when I have one of those days, I don't know, I can't help it, but in the back of my mind, I start thinking, what? Well, what's going to happen bad? You know what I mean? But there's days that God, and really, if you look at your life, you really are having 100 times more better days than you are even having bad days. Now, I'm really serious. For every sleepless night you've had, I couldn't sleep too good last night, so I got up out of my recliner and went to lay down in the bed with Cheryl, and I slept good. Now, she woke up at 2:30 and never went back to sleep. But I slept real good, you see. And so, I don't think she appreciated that, but I have no, listen to me. Every sleepless night you have, even statistics prove this, you have at least 4 or 5 good nights. And it's just like the devil many times in life tries to come and puts the brakes on our life. He likes to rain on your parade, and he tries to discourage you. Here Moses is probably, in my opinion, on top of the hill spiritually. He has seen God do a work that is just beyond describability. That's the only way you can say it. It's just beyond describability. And he is excited, and he's on fire, and he sends out these guys to see what kind of land it is, and they come back, and the first report, as you've read there, it's good, isn't it? It's positive. It's wonderful. But then they said, nevertheless, the people who dwelt there, verse 29, are strong, and the cities are fortified and are very large. Moreover, we even see the descendants of Anak and the Amalekites dwell in the lands of the south, and the Hittites and the Jebusites and the Amorites dwell in the mountains, and the Canaanites dwell by the sea and along the Jordan. Now all of a sudden, they see an obstacle. Now I want to point out something to you today. Listen to me. I want to listen to you. I want to teach you something. If you haven't figured this out, every time you have a great blessing in life, do not forget, God will allow obstacles to be there. If life could be just perfect 7 days a week, let's be honest, you really would not want to probably die and say, well, let's go to heaven if this is heaven on earth. If every day was just utopia, if every day was just wonderful, everything not only goes right, all the blessings are pouring upon you, and it's just the land of flowing of milk and honey, you'd probably get to the point to sit there and say, you know, I don't know if I want to leave this place. Secondly, you would have a hard time at one point of life, sooner or later. You say, no, I wouldn't let this bother me. But I'm going to tell you, you're human. Sooner or later, if every day for years, if everything went great, you would have a hard time having compassion on those who were having bad days. You really would. You'd be sitting there saying, what is your problem? What is it you've done wrong? Why is it God hasn't blessed you? So you see, God allows sometimes in life these obstacles, but it's not to break us down, but it's to make us stronger. I'm going to point out very quickly 3 things these men did not do. They came back and they said of all the good things, but then they said, oh boy, all these enemies, and all of them are big, especially the Amalekites. They're just monsters. We're in trouble. We can't take this. But first of all, they had forgot what God had done to them and to Pharaoh. Now, the next time you have a bad day, go back in your mind, I'm going to teach you something, and think about all the good things that God has done for you and other problems that you've had. You see my point? Believe it or not, this surgery I had was painful, but it was not hard for me to deal with mentally because I have had other surgeries. And because I've had other surgeries, it helped me to put things in perspective. Now, when you come home from surgery, the first days, it's a breeze. That's no problem at all. Hey, you medicated. Ain't no pain, no sorrow, Just life is good. But then all reality happens, don't it? It's the second day. Why did God give you that second day? Huh? And all the things bad happen to you, the pain, the suffering. But you know what? I said, you know what? I've been through this before. I've had surgeries. This is to be expected. You see, when's the last time you went through a trouble that you didn't stop and say, but God got me out of worse situations. God helped me through tight times financially. We're encouraging you to try to give some more. And I know anytime you say that, people sort of cringe and say, well, preacher, it's tight already. But I want to tell you something. I never gave anything to God that he didn't bless me. I went ahead and gave my check. Me and Charles said, we're going to do it. We just did it. And I was facing about 3 obstacles this week, not just from my health, but even things that was happening to my properties. And I said, Lord, I just don't want to spend more money. I've just spent thousands of dollars on this particular piece of equipment. And I'm going to tell you how God blessed me. I finally loaded up the piece of equipment. I took it up to a buddy of mine. I found a new friend up in Mullins. And you know what it was? What I thought my tractor was tore up was a $10 boat. Now, I call that a blessing from God. Because I'd spent $1,100 back in the fall rebuilding that tractor. You see, God blessed me. And let me tell you the second blessing. Again, God bless the television ministry. God bless the media. I'm telling you, I'm sitting there with 2 men at this place. It's only 2 people working there. And I'm trying to sort of hold this. And I've told him, I said, sir, I've had all this surgery, but I'll try to hold this shaft for you, And all of a sudden, he looked at me, and I had an old white T-shirt on, grease all over me, an old pair of cut-off jeans. He said, you're a preacher, aren't you? I grinned. I said, well, yes, sir. He said, I watch you.
Transform the roof on your home, church, or business into this. A 5-rib metal panel roof from Dry Home Roofing, a Christian-owned roofing company specializing in metal roofing and gutters. We install 29 and 26 gauge metal roofing with a 40-year warranty and a 2-year labor warranty. Our patented end cap helps to prevent wind damage and control water flow off the end of the roof. For your free estimate, contact Dry Home Roofing to transform your roof today.
Let me tell you, you see, God had a purpose. So the first time or the next time the devil aggravates you and puts an obstacle, remember what God has done for you. God had softened Pharaoh's heart. Why? He brought these plagues upon them. He broke down this enemy that had encompassed and destroyed these same people for 400 years. You know, sometimes we need to remember some of the pain and suffering because it reminds us of what God had done to them. Then God had blessed them materially. Do you really believe in this morning that if you give your tithes and offering and your time and your talent to the kingdom, that God will bless you? You believe that? Well, let me see your hand. You really, really, really believe God will bless you? Well, I want to remind you what God did for you. Some of you were in the hospital a while back, and God brought you out of the hospital. Now, I call that a blessing. Some of you have had to have surgery and sickness, and I know you didn't enjoy it. It wasn't fun, but didn't God bring you out? Some of you have had times that you're real tight on your money, but if you continue to give, doesn't God make a way? Some of you have had car wrecks and accidents. Folks, it may be bad still, but you didn't die. I mean, I could think of 1,000 things like that. It just depends on how you want to look at this. You see, they had forgot God's blessing, not just bringing them out of Egypt. What had God done for them? Listen, at the end of the last plague, when he sends the death angel, and Pharaoh even loses his son, that's when he breaks him, doesn't he? He tells Moses to flee, take the people, and then he says, take any spoil of Egypt. Which was really probably a mistake on their part, in a sense. But you know what? God did bless them. In other words, they could take the gold, they could take the silver, they could take whatever they had acquired, or even more they wanted to. Isn't that amazing? And financially, look at your life. How do you survive through the years? When the market was down, the economy was bad. Now, economy's good right now. And boy, it's an exciting time, and people are making a lot of money, but don't forget the times that there was days maybe you didn't eat every meal. And it wasn't because you was trying to lose weight. Or if you did eat, it wasn't going out to eat. How many remember that? Cooking at home. It's a forgotten principle, I think, in life. But it's so true. Count your blessings. Think about the times God helped you and blessed you and protected you. I'm going to share one more. We've been praying for my daughter. They'd found a little mass on her base of her skull, and we were asking to pray for. And when people hear that news, automatically your mind goes, well, this is cancer, is it? You can't help to think that. And yet God had a wonderful thing, and she found out again from a second MRI this week that it was just the cyst. It was only one, not two. It's certainly very treatable, and it's so small, even her friend who's the neurologist said, I don't even want to fool with it at this point. Now, you may not call that a blessing financially, but I do. I do. Folks, if you've got your health today and you're sort of even halfway healthy, you're blessed. If you've lived as long as you have lived, you ought to say, oh, thank you, God, because there's people that have been dead for years. I ain't talking about the last 6 months or a year ago, but you've buried friends years ago. You've buried family years ago who never lived this long. They shared with me, Ruth was sharing with me, and I would rejoice with that. I'd heard they've got 2 of the young little boys out of Thailand in that cave. Now, that's a blessing to me because I've been praying for those little boys. I mean, that'd be a terrible situation in there, And so you need to learn to count the blessings. And then God had also led them. He'd not just blessed them. Listen, He just didn't just send them out there and say, well, I hope you make it through the desert or the wilderness. The Scripture said He put a cloud by day, which, did you ever have a real hot day? Boy, I tell you, Friday was a hot day, wasn't it? And I woke up this morning, like most of the time, it was pretty early, and I went outside and let Ralphie outside, and I'm telling you, I was like, it feels good. Don't that feel good? I even went in and opened up the windows, at the house a little bit, let that cool breeze come in. You see, God loved his children so much because remember, according to history, there was around 2 million people leaving. Now, that's a big exodus. That's why it's called Exodus in the Bible. Do you know that? That means they left town. And the Bible said, to keep these people in not only comfort, but to help them physically go through the journey, he put a cloud by day. And then he let them travel even by nighttime. Because he put a light out by night that they could see. And they had forgot that. God hadn't abandoned them. Well, he's leading you just as much as you'll let him. I want to say it again. That was a good point. Only one sister got it. God will only lead you as far as you let him. If you don't let him, and what I've learned about God, he'll say, okay, I'll let you do it your way. See if you can handle it without me. But you know what? I think if you get wise, you realize that God needs and knows what's best. Also, the bigger the blessing, or the bigger the obstacle, the greater the blessing. I really believe that. I really believe that. Now, I didn't want to have this surgery because if anybody in the face of this earth hates to have to be cut on, surely it's me. And it's not the pain, and it really isn't. I'm not a wimp. Little. Depends on who you ask. I'm really not, though. But you know the hardest part of this? What's the hardest part? People who know me, what's the hardest part for me having this surgery? My wife said years ago, after we'd been married a few years, she said that if you had been raised in this modern time and gone to public school, they'd have definitely put you on Ritalin. I'm telling you, you needed that stuff, buddy. I have always been wide open all of my life. And that's the hardest thing. Just not doing it. You want to reach over and do it, and you start to do it, and you're like, oh, that hurts. I better not do it. Or I want to get out and do something or work around the church or do something here or at the house or somewhere. And I'm like, no. And that's cruel to me. Now, some people, that'd be the greatest blessing in the world. They just lay right down there and work don't bother them. They go to sleep beside it every day, don't they? I just can't do that. But you know what? God has reminded me that at times in life, if you're going to have a greater blessing, you have to have sometimes great obstacles. I really believe this. I believe that anything that's worth having, you have to work for it, fight for it, and give it 100%. I'm serious. I'm serious. And so God brought these people to this point. You know the rest of the story. He had protected them. He brought them out of slavery. He had also delivered from Pharaoh, and then he broke Pharaoh. And he took care of their enemy. And to this day, what nation truly fears Egypt? That's sort of amazing, isn't it? What God kicks down, it don't usually rise up, and that's been thousands of years ago. I'm going to tell you something. It's the same thing for America today. As I watch the national news, I become more agitated. That it breaks my heart to see humans treating each other this way. And I say, oh God, how much more can you stand? How much more can you take? And what's going on here? Why are people this way? But you see, I have learned this to be true. That anything I've ever had to do in life, the devil puts obstacles, but the greater blessing is if I will be obedient to God. That's the very last thing. I can't control what somebody else does. I can control what you give or don't give, or what you work in the church or don't work. I have no control over that and don't want to. I can only answer what I'm going to do. And I'm going to tell you something, folks. He's been awful good to this old boy. He has blessed me in ways that I know in my heart I don't deserve that. I haven't earned it. And it is amazing grace. I had a funeral here Thursday, and it was just so heart-wrenching. 36-year-old woman who was hit by a car and left in the road down here in front of the Volkswagen dealership, and to die like a dog. And if you were here, the saddest part of that service was right here, sitting right here, was one of her children, and right over there was the other. It was bad for the 16-year-old, but the 4-year-old little boy was sitting there. And folks, at the end of the service, he went to weeping, didn't he, ladies? He went to sobbing. And he hollered, "Oh, my mama." And I thought that the sheetrocks in this building would weep. I mean, it just was gut-wrenching to hear a little boy. And you know, I look at my life and say, you ain't got it bad. You've really had a good life, you see. Because I have never had to face that. Maybe some of you had. And yet I know if you keep your faith, and most of you have, and I believe that, I believe God will build on that. It's true, as you're trying to climb the hill of your life, Satan is right behind you holding the brake and laughing the whole time, you know, and think it's hilarious. And there's times that you say, well, I'm just not going to go to church. What's the point in doing that? That's what he wants you to say. He'll say to you, I ain't going to put my tithes or offering into the church. I can't even pay my bills now. So what would make any sense giving what I don't? And he wants you to do that because, you see, he wants to stop the blessings. He does. He wants you to sit there and say, I'm just going to let this run my life. Whatever you might go through or going through, whether it's physical sickness, emotional sickness, mental sickness. We looked up an actress the other night, and I remember very vividly. She was in The Shining. Remember The Shining? She was the lady who played the wife who, when he goes crazy and starts chopping through the door and says, "Here's Johnny." Jack. Did you know they said that poor woman has lost her mind? Have you ever read her story? I'm telling you, mental sickness is a serious thing, and it's real. And I don't make fun of nobody that way. I feel so sad. Literally, before we started the service Thursday, a man walked in. He said, "I'm looking for Joel." "Sir, he's vacated." He said, "Well, where's he at?" He said, "I need to talk to him." And I could tell by his demeanor and the way he was dressed that something obviously was wrong. I said, "Well, sir, he's no longer here." "You mean he quit the church?" And I said, "No." "You mean he quit preaching?" I said, "Yes, he did do that." "Well," he said, "I can't believe he quit preaching." I said, where he went, they don't need no preachers. That's the good thing in heaven, isn't it, Mike? We're going to be unemployed. We don't need a job up there. Nobody wants to hire us up there because ain't nobody going to be lost. You don't have to sit there and try to keep encouraging people. Say, see, don't give up. I finally told him the situation. And he starts to telling me, now he don't remember me. He said, there used to be a big old guy that used to be with him all the time, big broad shoulder. And he said, I even went to Tennessee with Joel one time, helped him work on his sister's church. I just sit there and listen. And I said, well, I've got this funeral here literally in just a minute or two. If you either hang around or if you'll come back a little bit, I'll see what I can do to help. And I thought of that man. He didn't come back. You see, he allowed and has allowed for years to believe that Satan and the lies that Satan has told him, that it's better being an addiction, it's better living on the streets, it's better living hungry. It's not, folks, but he's convinced that. And I look at my life and say, oh God, you have been good to me. So what's the ends of the results of this sermon? Well, you got a choice today. Depends on how you want to look at life. You can let things get you down. You say, oh, but life's good right now. But don't forget, I told them at the funeral too, if you're on top of the world, and this is you right here, and the world is underneath my finger. Don't forget, every day the world keeps doing this. And if you're fixed to that top point, and as you move, what will happen? And one day the world will roll over you. That's just what the world does. And if that's where you're building your hope, you're building it in vain. And Moses, I'm sure, was discouraged. All of these men said, we can't do it, but you know what? There was 2 of them that didn't. Two of them come back and said, you know, that's not so. 2 of these men, Caleb and Joshua, said, man, let me tell you, we can do this. We can take this land. We have come this far. Surely to God we won't go backward. And that's something you need to remember when the trials hit you. Look how far God has brought you. Look how long He's let you live. Look at the things that you've gone through in the past. And you say, well, I can get through this. Because, buddy, that back there was really hard. I can get through this. And look how He's not ever left you. He's leading you, folks. He is taking care of you. Even when we didn't love Him, He takes care of us. You know. And so you stop and remember these things and say, you know what, I'm going to go on. With God's help, I'm going to possess that land one day. Now, it's not the land that I'm looking for this world, but it's the world to come. My grandson said to me this week, he said, what are we going to do when we get to heaven? Well, I did tell him that. I said, well, according to the Bible, it's first of all, there's no time, but they're continually praising God. Now, but you understand, he's 13 years old. He's like, you mean we're just going to praise God? I said, well, that's part of it. But I said, you know, I think, and this is my opinion, I think heaven will be sort of different for a lot of us. I said, what makes me happy may not make you happy. I don't care for the mansion. You know, the Bible says He will do that, but I don't want a mansion. I wouldn't mind having a little cabin on the side of a creek, a little fishing pole, because I do love to fish. I never get to, but it's not because people don't ask me. I just don't take the time. So I said to Ethan, I said, Ethan, you know, I think it'll be what makes you happy. And he said, well, will we know people up there like we do down here? Well, that's an easy question. The Bible said you will be known as you were known. You're going to meet people that's lived a long time ago. And I said, you know, I don't know all the answers about heaven, but I know this much. It'll sure beat this world. And the best part is God's going to be there and Jesus is going to be there. The land of milk and honey is the land I want to go to eternally.